Abandoned hope. The twin suns of Tyloch 7 dipped below the horizon, painting the alien sky in hues of deep purple and crimson. Zara, a slender figure with iridescent scales and large almond-shaped eyes, huddled against the trunk of a massive fungal tree. Her chest heaved with exhaustion and fear as she watched the last transport ship of her people, the Xyloxians, disappear into the darkening sky. They had left her behind. At just 16 cycles old, Zara had been deemed too weak to survive the grueling journey to their new homeworld. The elders had made their decision, and now she was alone on this unforgiving planet, surrounded by creatures that saw her as nothing more than prey. Zara's four-fingered hand clutched a small device, her last connection to her people. It was a basic survival kit, containing a water purifier, nutrient tablets, and a short-range communicator. She knew it wouldn't last long, but it was all she had. As night fell, the forests of Tyloch 7 came alive with bioluminescent flora and the eerie calls of nocturnal predators. Zara's heart raced as she realized she needed to find shelter quickly. She activated the faint glow of her scales, a natural defense mechanism of her species, and began to move through the dense undergrowth. Hours passed as Zara navigated the treacherous terrain. Her feet ached, and her lungs burned from the slightly toxic atmosphere. Just as she was about to collapse from exhaustion, she spotted a cave entrance hidden behind a curtain of glowing vines. Cautiously, Zara entered the cave. It was deep and dry, offering a modicum of safety from the dangers outside. She curled up in a corner, her scales dimming to conserve energy. As sleep began to overtake her, Zara allowed herself a moment of despair. How long could she survive alone in this hostile world? A deafening roar jolted Zara awake. The ground beneath her trembled, and a blinding light flooded the cave. Panic seized her as she scrambled deeper into the shadows, her mind racing with possibilities. Had the predators found her? Was this some new terror she hadn't yet encountered? The light faded, replaced by the acrid smell of burning fuel and the sound of twisting metal. Curiosity overcame fear, and Zara crept towards the cave entrance. What she saw made her gasp. A massive ship, unlike anything she had ever seen, lay broken and smoking on the forest floor. It was clearly not of Xyloxian design, its hull a patchwork of metal plates and strange symbols. As Zara watched, a hatch on the side of the ship burst open, and figures began to emerge. They were bipedal, like Xyloxians, but that's where the similarities ended. These creatures had no scales, instead covered in what appeared to be synthetic materials of various colors. Their faces were flat, with small eyes, protruding noses, and fur on top of their heads. Humans, Zara had heard stories of them from the elders, a species known for their resourcefulness and determination. But what were they doing here, on this abandoned world? The humans stumbled out of their ship, coughing and disoriented. Zara counted 7 of them, all appearing injured to varying degrees. One figure, taller than the rest, with close-cropped dark fur on its head, seemed to be in charge. It barked orders in a language Zara couldn't understand, gesturing urgently at the others. As Zara observed, she noticed the humans' evident struggle with Tyloch 7's environment. They winced at the toxic air, their eyes watering and skin reddening from exposure. Without proper protection, they wouldn't survive long. A conflict raged within Zara. These were aliens, potentially dangerous. But they were also clearly in need of help that only she, with her knowledge of this world, could provide. The teachings of her people echoed in her mind. In the vastness of the cosmos, compassion is the rarest and most valuable resource. Taking a deep breath, Zara stepped out of the cave and into view. Immediately, all activity ceased as the humans turned to stare at her. She raised her hands, palms outward, in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Greetings," Zara said, using the basic interstellar language she had learned in her studies. "I am Zara of the Xyloxians. This world is not safe for you. Please, let me help." The humans exchanged bewildered glances, The leader stepped forward, one hand resting on a device at its hip, likely a weapon. Its eyes, a startling shade of green, studied Zara intently. "I am Captain Elena Reyes of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon," the human replied in the same interstellar language, its voice surprisingly melodious. "We've crash-landed after an encounter with space pirates. Can you tell us where we are?" Zara nodded, relieved that communication was possible. "This is Tylock 7, a world my people once called home. The atmosphere is toxic to most species, and dangerous predators roam freely. You need shelter and protection immediately." Captain Reyes glanced back at her crew, then at their smoldering ship. "Our vessel is too damaged to provide adequate shelter. Do you know of a safe place nearby?" "The cave I emerged from is large and defensible," Zara offered. "I can show you how to create barriers against the toxins and predators. But first, you need to cover your exposed skin. The air here will cause severe damage with prolonged exposure." Reyes nodded sharply, turning to bark orders at her crew. They quickly retrieved protective gear from the ship, covering themselves from head to toe. As they worked, Zara noticed their efficiency and teamwork, a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchy of her own people. Once the humans were properly outfitted, Zara led them to the cave. Along the way, she pointed out dangerous plants to avoid and showed them which fungi could be used to create a paste that would help neutralize the air's toxicity. Inside the cave, Zara demonstrated how to use the bioluminescent moss on the walls to provide light. "We need to seal the entrance," she explained. "There are large leaves from the sentinel trees that work well as insulation and will help filter the air. I can show you where to find them." Over the next few hours, Zara worked alongside the humans to make the cave habitable. She was impressed by their resourcefulness and adaptability. They quickly grasped the properties of the alien materials and found innovative ways to use them. By the time the twin suns had risen again, they had created a secure shelter with separate sleeping areas and a central gathering space. As they huddled around heating units salvaged from the ship, Captain Reyes turned to Zara. "Thank you for your help," she said, her voice warm with gratitude. "We would likely be dead without it. Now, can you tell us more about this planet and why you're here alone?" Zara felt a lump form in her throat. She had been so focused on helping the humans that she had momentarily forgotten her own dire situation. "Tylock 7 was once a thriving world," she began, her voice quiet. "But in recent cycles, it has become increasingly hostile. The atmosphere turned toxic, predators grew more aggressive, and resources became scarce." She paused, gathering her courage to continue. "My people, the Vasiloctians, made the decision to evacuate. They left me behind. I was deemed too weak to survive the journey to our new home." A hush fell over the group of humans. Zara saw expressions of shock, anger, and sympathy cross their faces. Captain Reyes reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently placing a hand on Zora's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," Reyes said, her green eyes filled with compassion. "No one deserves to be abandoned like that. But you've proven your strength and worth by surviving here and by saving us. As long as we're here, you're not alone anymore." Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name. For the first time since watching her people's ships disappear into the sky, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her large eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm glad you're here." Captain Reyes smiled, a determined look settling on her face. "What happens next is we survive. Together. And then we find a way off this planet. All of us." As the rest of the crew nodded in agreement, Zara realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She may have lost her people, but in their place, she had found something unexpected. Allies from the stars, bringing with them the promise of a future she had thought lost forever. The twin suns of Tylock 7 climbed higher in the alien sky, casting long shadows through the fungal forests. Inside the cave, humans and a lone Tyloxian began to plan their survival on this harsh world, united by circumstance and a shared will to live. Little did they know, their greatest challenges and triumphs still lay ahead. Unlikely allies. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity as the humans and Zara worked to establish a sustainable living situation in their cave refuge. Captain Alina Reyes had divided her crew into teams, each focused on essential tasks: fortifying their shelter, scavenging for resources, and repairing what they could of their damaged ship. Zara found herself constantly amazed by the humans' ingenuity and adaptability. Where her own people might have seen insurmountable obstacles, these aliens from Earth saw challenges to be overcome. One morning, as the twin suns of Tylock 7 cast their eerie purple light across the landscape, Zara led a small group including Captain Reyes and the ship's engineer, Dr. Amit Patel, to a nearby clearing. "These are glow fronds," Zara explained, pointing to large fan-like plants that pulsed with a soft blue light. "Their fibers can be woven into a fabric that neutralizes the toxins in the air. It's how my people protected themselves before developing more advanced technology." Dr. Patel's eyes lit up with excitement. "Fascinating. If we could integrate this into our existing gear, it could significantly extend our ability to work outside the cave." Captain Reyes nodded approvingly. "Good thinking, Amit. Zara, can you show us how to harvest and process these fronds?" As Zara demonstrated the careful technique required to extract the glowing fibers without damaging the plant, she couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the humans' approach and that of her own people. Where the Psyloxians had eventually chosen to abandon their home rather than continue adapting, these humans seemed to thrive on finding new solutions. Back at the cave, Dr. Patel and the ship's medic, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, worked tirelessly to incorporate the glow frond fibers into their protective gear. Zara watched in fascination as they combined the alien material with their own technology, creating hybrid suits that offered superior protection against the toxic atmosphere. "It's remarkable," Dr. Tanaka mused as she examined the finished product. "The interaction between the fibers and our nanofilters has created a synergy we never could have achieved with Earth-based materials alone." Zara felt a surge of pride at the compliment, even as a pang of sadness reminded her of all her people had left behind. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. As the days wore on, communication between Zara and the humans improved steadily. The ship's linguist, Dr. Maria Santos, worked diligently to create a more comprehensive translation system, allowing for deeper and more nuanced conversations. One evening, as the group gathered around the central heating unit for their nightly meal, Dr. Santos turned to Zara, with curiosity burning in her eyes. "Zara, I've been meaning to ask, how does your species reproduce? I've noticed you used feminine pronouns, but your biology seems so different from ours." Zara's scales shifted color slightly. A Xyloxian blush. We don't reproduce the way you do," she explained hesitantly. "Tyloxians are sequential hermaphrodites. We begin life in a neutral state, then develop into either male or female based on the needs of our community. I'm currently in a female phase, but that could change if circumstances required it." The humans exchanged fascinated glances. "That's incredible," Dr. Tanaka breathed. "The adaptability of your species is remarkable. It must allow for great flexibility in your social structures." Zara nodded, warming to the topic. "It does. Our elders taught us that this adaptability was key to our survival on Psylocke 7 for so many generations. We could quickly adjust our population dynamics to match available resources." Her voice trailed off as she remembered once again that she was the last of her kind on this world. Captain Rice, noticing Zora's sudden melancholy, gently steered the conversation in a new direction. "Speaking of resources, we need to discuss our long-term plans. Our food supplies won't last forever, and we need to find a way to either repair our ship or signal for rescue." The mood in the cave turned serious as the reality of their situation settled over the group. Zara spoke up, her voice quiet but determined. "There's an old Xyloxian outpost about 3 days' journey from here. It was abandoned during the evacuation, but it might have communication equipment or other useful technology. Ray's eyes lit up with hope. That could be exactly what we need. But a 3-day journey through this terrain and atmosphere won't be easy. I can guide you, Zara offered quickly. I know the safest routes and how to avoid the most dangerous predators. The captain studied Zara for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we'll prepare for the expedition. Dr. Patel, how are the repairs on our portable energy cells coming along? As the humans discussed the logistics of the upcoming journey, Zara felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She was eager to prove her worth to these people who had accepted her so readily, but the thought of venturing out into the wilds of Tylock 7 filled her with a primal fear she couldn't quite shake. Later that night, as the others slept, Zara stood at the entrance of the cave, gazing out at the bioluminescent forest. The familiar sounds and smells of her homeworld washed over her, at once comforting and terrifying. Couldn't sleep. Captain Ray's voice came softly from behind her. Zara turned, offering a small smile. Just thinking about the journey ahead, about everything that's changed. Ray's moved to stand beside her, her eyes scanning the alien landscape. Change can be frightening, she said after a moment. But it can also bring unexpected opportunities. When we crashed here, I thought we were doomed. Now, thanks to you, we have a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. I've been wondering, Zara began hesitantly, if we do manage to repair your ship or call for rescue, what will happen to me? The captain turned to face her, expression serious. Zara, you've saved our lives and become an integral part of this team. As far as I'm concerned, you have a place with us, for as long as you want it. If we make it off this planet, you'll be welcome to come with us. Tears welled up in Zara's large eyes, her scales shimmering with emotion. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what to say. Ray smiled, reaching out to gently squeeze Zara's shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just keep being the brave, resourceful person you are. Now, try to get some rest. We have a big journey ahead of us. As Captain Reyes headed back into the cave, Zara remained at the entrance for a few moments longer. She looked up at the unfamiliar stars, thinking about the vastness of the universe and the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. For the first time since being left behind, Zara felt truly hopeful about the future. She had found not just allies, but friends among these humans. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. With a deep breath, Zara turned away from the night and walked back into the cave. As she settled into her sleeping area, her mind raced with plans for the upcoming expedition. They would need to gather specific plants for food and medicine, plot a course that avoided the territories of the most dangerous predators, and prepare for the unpredictable weather patterns of Thylox 7. But as sleep finally claimed her, Zara's last thoughts were not of the dangers ahead, but of the unexpected gifts she had been given, a second chance at life, and a new family among the stars. The next day dawned with a sense of purpose as the humans and Zara began their preparations for the journey to the abandoned Xyloxian outpost. The cave buzzed with activity as supplies were packed, equipment was checked and double-checked, and last-minute adjustments were made to their protective gear. As Zara helped Dr. Tanaka pack a portable medical kit with both human supplies and local medicinal plants, she couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Despite the dangers, the prospect of exploring her homeworld with these fascinating aliens filled her with a sense of adventure she had never experienced before. Little did they know, the true tests of their newfound alliance were yet to come. The wilds of Thylox 7 held secrets and dangers that would push them to their limits, forcing human and Xyloxian alike to draw upon strengths they never knew they possessed. As the twin suns climbed higher in the alien sky, Zara and her human companions prepared to step out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them on their quest for survival and salvation. Looming threat, the expedition into the wilds of Thylox 7 began at dawn. Zara led the way, her iridescent scales shimmering in the purple light of the twin suns. Behind her, Captain Rice, Dr. Patel, Dr. Tanaka, and Security Officer Jack Morrison followed in a tight formation, their modified protective suits gleaming with the integrated Glowfron technology. As they trekked through the dense fungal forests, Zora's senses were on high alert. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every distant cry of an alien creature sent a shiver down her spine. She knew all too well the dangers that lurked in the shadows of this world. "Watch your step here," Zora cautioned as they approached a field of what looked like innocuous purple flowers. "These are neurotoxin blooms. A single touch can paralyze a full-grown Psylocsin." Officer Morrison whistled low. "Nasty stuff. Thanks for the heads-up, Zora." As they carefully navigated around the deadly flora, Dr. Patel's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange energy readings about half a kilometer ahead. It doesn't match anything in our database." Captain Rice frowned. "Zora, any ideas what that could be?" Zora's large eyes blinked in concentration. "There's an old mineral extraction site in that direction. My people abandoned it cycles ago when the veins ran dry, but some of the equipment might still be active. Worth checking out," Rice decided. "We could use any working technology we can find. Lead the way, Zora, but stay alert, everyone." As they approached the extraction site, the landscape changed dramatically. The lush fungal forest gave way to a barren expanse of rocky terrain, pockmarked with deep crevices and towering crystal formations that pulsed with an eerie inner light. "Incredible," Dr. Tanaka breathed, her scientific curiosity piqued. "These crystals seem to be generating their own bioelectric field." Zora nodded. "Yes, they're called Luminara crystals. They powered much of our technology before we developed more advanced energy sources." As the group explored the abandoned site, examining rusted machinery and collecting samples of the Luminara crystals, Officer Morrison suddenly held up a hand for silence. "Anyone else hear that?" he whispered, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. A low, rumbling growl echoed across the barren landscape. Zora felt her blood run cold. "Saxora," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We need to move. Now." Before anyone could react, a massive creature burst from one of the crevices. It was easily the size of a small shuttle, with 6 powerful legs, a heavily armored body, and a maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Its multiple eyes fixed on the group with predatory intent. "Scatter," Captain Rice shouted, and the team sprang into action. The Saxora let out a deafening roar and charge. Its massive bulk belied its speed, and it was on them in seconds. Officer Morrison opened fire with his plasma rifle, the energy bolts glancing off the creature's armored hide. "Aim for the joints in its armor." Zora cried out, dodging a swipe from one of the Saxora's clawed limbs. Dr. Patel, thinking quickly, grabbed one of the Luminara crystals and hurled it at the beast. The crystal shattered against its hide, releasing a burst of bioelectric energy that momentarily stunned the Saxora. Captain Rice seized the opportunity. "Morrison, Patel, grab more of those crystals. Tanaka, Zora, with me. We need to find cover." As Morrison and Patel bombarded the Saxora with the crystals, Rice led Tanaka and Zora towards a cluster of derelict mining equipment. They dove behind a massive excavator just as the Saxora recovered and charged again. "We can't keep this up forever," Tanaka panted, her eyes wide with fear behind her helmet visor. Zora's mind raced. She knew the Saxora's weak points, but their weapons weren't powerful enough to penetrate its armor. Then her eyes fell on a piece of mining equipment half buried in the rubble, a sonic drill. "Captain," Zora said urgently, "if we can activate that sonic drill and lure the Saxora over it, the vibrations might be enough to disorient it. Their hearing is incredibly sensitive." Rice nodded sharply. "Good thinking." "Patel," she called over the comm, "we need a distraction. Use your suit's emergency flares." As Patel launched a series of bright flares into the air, momentarily confusing the Saxora, Reyes and Zara sprinted for the sonic drill. Zara's hands flew over the ancient Psyloccian controls, her heart's pounding in her chest. Come on, she muttered, just as the Saxora turned its attention back to them. The drill whirred to life with a high-pitched whine. Now we just need to get it over here, Reyes said, her voice grim. Zara took a deep breath. I'll lure it. My bioluminescence. It'll be drawn to the movement. Before Reyes could protest, Zara darted out from behind the drill. She let her scales flare with bright, pulsing light, a Xyloxian distress signal that no predator on this world could ignore. The Saxora's multiple eyes locked onto Zara, and it charged with a roar that shook the ground. Zara waited until the last possible moment before diving out of the way. The Saxora, unable to change direction quickly enough, thundered right over the activated sonic drill. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Saxora reared back, its roar turning into a shriek of pain as the sonic vibrations assaulted its sensitive hearing. It thrashed wildly, trying to escape the debilitating sound. Now's our chance, Reyes shouted, back to the forest. The team regrouped and ran, not stopping until they were safely back among the fungal trees. As they caught their breath, Captain Reyes turned to Zara, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. That was incredibly brave, Zara, and incredibly reckless. Don't scare us like that again. Zara's scales rippled with a mix of embarrassment and pride. I'm sorry, Captain. I just knew I had to do something. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Zara's shoulder. You saved our lives back there. Thank you. As the adrenaline of the encounter faded, the reality of what they'd just survived began to sink in. The dangers of Tylock 7 were far greater than any of them had imagined, and they were still 2 days away from their destination. We need to be more prepared, Officer Morrison said, checking his now depleted weapon. That thing shrugged off my plasma bolts like they were nothing. Dr. Patel nodded in agreement. The Luminara crystals seemed effective. Perhaps we can find a way to weaponize them, integrate them into our existing technology. Captain Reyes considered this for a moment. Good idea. Zara, what do you know about these crystals? Can they be safely transported? As Zara began explaining the properties of the Luminara crystals, the group settled into a makeshift camp. The encounter with the Saxora had shaken them all, but it had also crystallized the reality of their situation. They were no longer just survivors waiting for rescue. They were explorers and innovators, forced to adapt to one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. As night fell and the bioluminescent life of Tylock 7 came alive around them, Zara found herself filled with a strange mix of fear and excitement. The journey ahead would be perilous, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. With these humans by her side, facing the dangers of her homeworld, Zara realized she had found something she never knew she was missing: a sense of belonging. Little did they know, the Saxora encounter was just the beginning. The true tests of their resilience, ingenuity, and newfound bond were yet to come. As they rested under the alien sky, the abandoned Xyloxian outpost, and the promise of salvation it held, beckoned from beyond the horizon. The Great Hunt. As the twin sons of Tylock 7 rose on the third day of their journey, Zara and her human companions found themselves on the edge of a vast, undulating plain. The fungal forests they had traversed gave way to a sea of tall, swaying grass-like vegetation in shades of deep indigo and cerulean. The outpost should be just beyond this expanse, Zara explained, her large eyes scanning the horizon. But we must be cautious. This is prime hunting ground for many of Tylock 7's apex predators. Captain Reyes nodded grimly. Understood. Morrison, take point. Patel, keep scanning for any energy signatures. We don't want any more surprises like that Saxora. As they began their trek across the plain, Dr. Tanaka fell into step beside Zara. These plants are fascinating, she mused, gesturing to the swaying vegetation. They seemed to be moving more than the wind would account for. Zara's scales rippled with acknowledgement. Good observation. These are actually a form of colonial organism. They communicate through chemical signals and movement. Watch. She reached out and gently brushed one of the indigo stalks. Almost immediately, a visible wave of motion rippled outward from the point of contact, the stalks bending away as if in retreat. Incredible, Tanaka breathed. A planet-wide neural network. Their wonderment was short-lived, however. Officer Morrison's voice crackled over the comm, urgent and low. Movement ahead. Multiple contacts. Closing fast. The team instantly dropped into defensive positions, their modified weapons, now integrated with shards of Luminara crystal, at the ready. Zara felt her hearts racing as she scanned the undulating sea of blue and indigo. Then she saw them. Sleek, six-limbed forms moving with preternatural grace through the vegetation. Their bodies were a patchwork of colors that seemed to shift and change as they moved, blending perfectly with their surroundings. Chameleon wolves, Zara whispered, her voice tight with fear. They hunt in packs, and they're incredibly intelligent. We need to. Her words were cut off as one of the creatures let out a bone-chilling howl. It was answered by a chorus of similar cries from all around them. They were surrounded. Form a circle. Rise commanded. Back to back. Zara, what are their weaknesses? Zara's mind raced. They rely heavily on camouflage and stealth. If we can disrupt their ability to blend in, we might stand a chance. Dr. Patel's eyes lit up with an idea. The plants. They respond to touch, right? If we can trigger a large enough reaction, it might reveal the wolves' positions. Do it, Rise ordered. Patel quickly rigged several of their flares with proximity sensors and tossed them in a wide circle around the group. As they detonated, the resulting shockwave sent a massive ripple through the vegetation. For a brief moment, the chameleon wolves were visible, sleek, predatory forms frozen in mid-stride as their camouflage recalibrated. It was all the opening the humans needed. Morrison and Rise opened fire with their crystal-enhanced weapons, the energy bolts now carrying a disruptive charge that seemed to interfere with the wolves' camouflage abilities. Two of the creatures fell, their bodies convulsing as the energy coursed through them. But the pack was far from defeated. With snarls of rage, they launched a coordinated attack. Zara found herself face to face with one of the beasts, its multiple eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. She ducked under its first lunge, her scaled hand reaching for the makeshift weapon Dr. Patel had crafted for her, a staff tipped with a Luminara crystal. As the wolf pounced again, Zora brought the staff up in a desperate arc. The crystal connected with the creature's head, releasing a burst of bioelectric energy. The wolf yelped in pain and confusion, its camouflage flickering wildly. All around her, the humans were engaged in similar struggles. Dr. Tanaka was using her medical scanner to emit targeted electromagnetic pulses, disrupting the wolves' sensory organs. Patel had rigged a makeshift EMP device that he was using to create zones of electromagnetic interference, further confusing the predators. But for every wolf they managed to drive back or incapacitate, two more seemed to take its place. The pack's intelligence was evident in their tactics. They were learning, adapting to the humans' technology with frightening speed. "We can't keep this up," Morrison shouted, narrowly avoiding a set of snapping jaws. "We need an exit strategy." Zara's mind raced. Then she remembered something. An old Diloxian hunting technique she'd learned in her youth. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Captain," she called out. "The plants, they're all connected. If we can trigger a massive reaction, it might create enough chaos for us to escape." Reyes nodded sharply, understanding dawning in her eyes. "What do you need?" "Overload one of your power cells. The energy release should be enough to start a chain reaction." Without hesitation, Reyes unclipped one of the spare power cells from her belt. "Paddle, rig this thing to blow. Everyone else, be ready to run on my mark." As Paddle worked feverishly to modify the power cell, the rest of the team formed a tight defensive circle. The wolves, sensing that their prey was planning something, intensified their attacks. Zara found herself fighting with a ferocity she never knew she possessed, her staff a blur of motion as she fended off the snapping jaws and raking claws of the predators. "Ready," Patel shouted, holding up the now humming power cell. Ray snatched it from him and hurled it as far as she could into the sea of vegetation. "Now, run." The team took off at a dead sprint in the opposite direction. Behind them, there was a blinding flash and a thunderous boom as the power cell detonated. The resulting energy wave rippled through the connected plants with devastating effect. The entire plain seemed to come alive, the vegetation thrashing and whipping about in a frenzy of motion and chemical signals. The chameleon wolves, their senses overwhelmed by the chaos, broke off their attack. Their howls of confusion and distress faded into the distance as Zara and the humans ran for their lives. They didn't stop running until they reached the far edge of the plain, collapsing in exhaustion at the base of a rocky outcropping. As they caught their breath, Captain Rice turned to Zara, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and gratitude. "That was incredible," she panted. "Quick thinking, Zara. You saved us all." Zara's scales flushed with a mix of embarrassment and pride. I just remembered something from my old lessons. I wasn't sure it would work." Dr. Tanaka, who was already tending to the various cuts and bruises the team had sustained, looked up with a weary smile. "Well, it did work. And it's given me about a dozen new ideas for potential bioweapons, if we ever need them." As the adrenaline of their narrow escape began to fade, the reality of their situation settled in. They had survived, against all odds, but they were battered, exhausted, and still a fair distance from their goal. Officer Morrison, ever vigilant, was scanning the horizon. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news," he said grimly, "but I think our little light show attracted some attention." The others followed his gaze. In the distance, dark shapes were moving across the sky, large, winged creatures that seemed to be heading in their direction. Captain Rice sighed, pushing herself to her feet. "No rest for the weary, it seems. Zara, any idea what those might be?" Zara squinted at the approaching forms, her heart sinking as recognition dawned. "Sky renders," she said quietly. "Apex aerial predators. They're drawn to energy discharges. Our battle must have attracted them." Patel, who was checking their remaining equipment, looked up with concern. "Captain, we're running low on power for our weapons. Another fight like that last one." Reyes nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Understood. We'll have to outsmart them." "Zara, how close are we to the outpost?" "Not far," Zara replied, pointing to a ridge in the near distance. "Just beyond that rise. If we can make it there, we might find shelter and resources. Then that's our play," Rice decided. "We make a run for it. Use the terrain for cover as much as possible. Save your weapons for a last resort." As the team prepared for what might be their final push, Zara felt a strange calm settle over her. She looked at these humans, battered, exhausted, but unbowed, and felt a surge of admiration and affection. Whatever happened next, she was proud to stand with them. "Ready?" Rice asked, her voice steady despite the approaching danger. Zara nodded, her scales shimmering with determination. "Ready." With the sky renders closing in and their destination tantalizingly close, the unlikely band of survivors set off on the last leg of their perilous journey. The abandoned Xyloxian outpost beckoned, promising shelter, resources, and perhaps a way off this deadly world. But as they ran, Zara couldn't help but wonder what other challenges awaited them. And would the outpost truly hold the salvation they sought, or only more dangers? The final test of their resilience, ingenuity, and newfound bond was about to begin. A new beginning. The sky render's shrieks pierced the air as Zara and the humans raced towards the ridge. The winged predators were closing in fast, their massive forms casting ominous shadows over the barren landscape. "There," Zara called out, pointing to a metallic glint just visible over the crest of the hill. "The outpost." Captain Ray's voice crackled over the comm system. "Final push, everyone. Morrison, Patel, be ready to lay down covering fire if necessary." As they crested the ridge, the full view of the Xyloxian outpost came into view. It was a sprawling complex of domed structures and towering antennae, its once gleaming surfaces now dulled by years of exposure to Tylox 7's harsh elements. "The main entrance is sealed," Zara panted as they approached the facility. "But there should be an emergency access panel. There." She darted towards a small, inconspicuous panel set into the base of the nearest building. Her fingers flew over the ancient controls, muscle memory kicking in despite years of disuse. Come on," she muttered, acutely aware of the approaching screeches of the sky renders. Suddenly, with a hiss of hydraulics, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a dark passageway. "Inside, now," Rise ordered. The team scrambled through the opening just as the first of the sky renders dove towards them, razor-sharp talons extended. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound of the creature's impact reverberating through the structure. For a moment, they stood in darkness, the only sounds their heavy breathing and the muffled shrieks of the frustrated predators outside. Then, with a low hum, emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the corridor in a soft, blue glow. "Is everyone all right?" Dr. Tanaka asked, already moving to check on each team member. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, the full weight of their journey settled upon them. They were exhausted, battered, and pushed to their limits. But they were alive, and they had reached their goal. Captain Rice turned to Zora, her eyes shining with a mix of relief and determination. "You did it, Zora. You got us here. Now let's see if this place has what we need to get off this planet." Zara nodded, her scales shimmering with a complex mix of emotions. This outpost had been part of her people's history, a reminder of the life and world they had abandoned. Now it represented hope for a future she never thought she'd have. As they made their way deeper into the facility, Dr. Patel's scanner came to life, beeping insistently. "Captain, I'm picking up a strong power signature. It seems the outpost's main reactor is still operational. Can we use it?" Rise asked, hope evident in her voice. Patel nodded enthusiastically. "If we can interface with the system, we might be able to boost our distress signal. Maybe even power up some of the old Xyloxian tech." They followed the energy readings to a vast chamber dominated by a pulsing crystalline structure, the outpost's main reactor. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. It was a masterpiece of Xyloxian engineering, a fusion of organic crystal growth and advanced technology. "It's beautiful," Dr. Tanaka breathed, echoing Zora's thoughts. Officer Morrison, ever practical, was already scanning the room for potential threats. "All clear, Captain. But I suggest we secure the perimeter before we start tinkering with alien tech." Rise nodded in agreement. "Good thinking. Morrison, you and Tanaka sweep the facility. Patel, see what you can do about interfacing our systems with this reactor. Zara, I need you to help me access any communication equipment this place might have." As the team split up to their tasks, Zara led Captain Rice to what had once been the outpost's command center. Dust-covered consoles lined the walls, their screens dark and lifeless. "Most of this technology is probably obsolete," Zara said, running her hand over a console. "But the basic principles should still apply. If we can route power from the main reactor, we might be able to send a signal strong enough to reach your people." For hours, they worked tirelessly. Patel's excited voice occasionally echoed through their comms as he made breakthroughs in integrating their technology with the Xyloxian systems. Morrison and Tanaka reported that the facility was secure, though they had found unsettling signs of how quickly Zora's people had abandoned the outpost. As the twin suns of Tylox 7 began to set, bathing the alien world in an eerie twilight, A newfound energy filled the air of the command center. Screens flickered to life, consoles hummed with power, and a holographic display of the surrounding star systems shimmered into existence. "I think we've done it," Rai said, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "Paddle, are we ready to transmit?" "Yes, Captain," came the reply. "The signal should be strong enough to reach the nearest human outpost." But what?" Rise pressed. "The power required. It's going to drain the reactor. We'll have one shot at this." A heavy silence fell over the team. This was their moment of truth, their one chance at rescue, at survival. Rise took a deep breath, then turned to Zara. "This is your home, Zara. Your people's legacy. The decision should be yours. Do we do this?" Zara looked around the room, taking in the mix of Xyloxian and human technology working in harmony. She thought of her people, who had chosen to abandon this world rather than continue to adapt. And she thought of these humans, who had faced every challenge with ingenuity and determination. "My people left this world behind," she said softly. "But in doing so, they left me with a gift. The chance to be part of something new. Something, perhaps, even greater." She met Raya's eyes, her own filled with resolve. "Send the signal, Captain. Let's go home." With a nod, Rise activated the transmission. The reactor's hum rose to a fever pitch, the crystalline structure pulsing with brilliant light. On the holographic display, they watched as their signal raced outward, carrying with it their hopes for rescue. As the last of the reactor's power was expended, the outpost fell into darkness once more. But this time, the darkness didn't feel oppressive or frightening. It felt like the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. In the dim emergency lighting, Captain Rise reached out and placed a hand on Zora's shoulder. "Now we wait," she said softly. "But whatever happens next, we face it together." Zara nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of hope and determination. As she looked around at her human companions, no, her friends, she realized that she had found something she never knew she was missing. A family, a purpose. The abandoned outpost, once a symbol of her people's retreat, had become the birthplace of a new future. A future where human ingenuity and Xyloxian wisdom could combine to face whatever challenges the universe might throw at them. As they settled in to wait for a response to their signal, Zara felt a sense of peace wash over her. Whatever lay ahead, rescue or further trials, she was no longer alone. She was part of a team, a family that had been forged in the crucible of Tylox 7's dangers. The twin suns of Tylox 7 dipped below the horizon, plunging the alien world into night. But within the old Xyloxian outpost, a new light had been kindled. The light of hope, of friendship, and of a future filled with endless possibilities. As they waited for a response to their signal, Zara and her human companions shared stories, laughter, and dreams of what might come next. They had survived the worst Tylox 7 could throw at them, and had emerged stronger for it. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. A union of two species, brought together by chance and bound by shared struggle and mutual respect. Their adventure on Tylox 7 was ending, but Zara knew that their greatest adventures were yet to come. In the vast, star-filled sky above the abandoned outpost, a new chapter in the story of both humanity and the Tyloxians was about to begin.